The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.
With so many people living longer, the fear of outliving your money becomes a reality for many of us. Will I be a financial burden? Will I outlive my money? How will I be remembered? My name is Neil Himmelstein, president of Main Street Planning Group. Please contact me by visiting mainstreetplanninggroup.com. That's mainstreetplanninggroup.com, or call 631-647-4694. I will introduce you to strategies that will guarantee you will not outlive your money, that can guarantee you will not be a burden on your loved ones. Through a collaborative approach, we will uncover solutions that offer tax-efficient strategies, lifetime income, and legacy planning, choice, organization, direction, and education. That is the code we stand behind. Contact mainstreetplanninggroup.com. That's mainstreetplanninggroup.com, or call 631-647-4694. And listen to me every Friday at 3 p.m. as I host the Main Street Code for Financial Success, right here on 103.9 LI News Radio. Welcome to the Main Street Planning Code for Financial Success. Yes, I'm a little jumbled today, folks. I am a grandpa now. And when we talk about our code, we talk about choice, organization, direction, and education, which brings me to my topic of the day, which is multi-generational planning. Because guess what? All planning today revolves around multiple generations, and I'm a perfect example, like everybody else is. So when I was many, many years ago, when my parents had us, actually their generation had a whole big thing. You know, kids would live in the house and they'd grow up in the house, and you had families close together. Then in my generation, when I grew up, we had 5 boys. We lived in 5 different states. And when my parents got older, my father needed long-term care. He had a bad back and bad discs, and even though he was an athlete, he had this situation where he really couldn't, walk anymore. His mind was sharp and everything else. And then my mom was taking care of him for years, and she passed taking care of him, even though she was 7 years younger, and even though my father, who was financially successful, was a retired veterinarian, but he couldn't physically do much of what he could do. He was wheelchair bound. He had lost his eyesight through macular degeneration. He was living in his house, and we lived in 5 different states. And how do we take care of Dad? And Dad refused to go to assisted living. He refused to move from his house. He had every right. He had money. He had some people come in the house, and they weren't the best people. He didn't necessarily take his medication correctly. So these were all big long-term care concerns. And, one of my brothers did move with him for 6 months and help him take care of, certain finances and things. But these are real considerations, even if we've done extremely well. Now we move on to my generation and my children. And, we've been empty nesters for a while. And my daughter had a baby this week, and she's back here in New York with me and her husband. I'm very excited. But of course, planning has changed. I'm near retirement, but I'm, still actively working, of course. But I'm just saying, all these things, when we're doing planning and it comes to care and it comes to this, is called multi-generational planning. And many advisors will focus on retirement planning or estate planning. We all do. Or accumulation planning for as we get older. But you need to consider multiple generations when any type of plan you do. So a lot of what we've been doing is what we call legacy planning for people that are at or near retirement. And we've been spending time for the last year, since the tax laws changed, talk about distribution of our IRAs and qualified money, because we can't leave it to the next generation without it being heavily, heavily taxed and forcing the next generation to take the money out over the next 10 years. So this is what we call a multi-generational dilemma on how do we pass money to the grandkids and the next kids without it being so overly taxed, and at the same time worried about our retirement and planning for our retirement. So you really have to mix your goals and aspirations and how you do your planning, and it's so important that your family members are involved in the communication process. So some of the things you can have to consider when heading towards retirement is, who's going to take care of you when you retire? Is your spouse going to take care of you? Are your children going to take care of you? How does it affect their lives? Especially if they have kids, or they've gone to college and they've moved on and they have an occupation and they're working out of the state or far away. How does that work? So the biggest risks family take are, one is a lack of communication. And a lack of communication of everybody's goals can lead to a lot of family conflict. It could lead to family conflict while you're living. I know people who are taking care of their parent and their other brothers and sisters aren't, and they have the burden of doing that, plus they have children of their own. So it can create major family conflict. Poor titling of your assets, your beneficiary designations. How does that work? How does it change when you have a new grandchild or a new person? Very interesting. Taxes, estate taxes, inheritance taxes, capital gains. All these are very big in retirement. And of course, we like to operate in as much as tax-free, but leaving money to the next generation or the generation after that, you don't want to leave them with a big tax bill and that big burden. So, and then you have to look at long-term care costs. Long-term care costs can wipe out your assets in a heartbeat. You know, right now, you go to a facility here on Long Island, it's $500 a day. $500 a day. That's a lot of money. That's, $180,000 a year. And that clock starts ticking if you don't have plans. Inheritances. Unequal inheritances cause a lot of conflict with children and the next generation. They may be great friends and everything else now, but if you don't treat them equally or semi-equally, that could create a lot of problems. We were working with a manufacturer a few years back, and he had a son and two daughters, and they were doing quite a good business. And he was leaving the whole business to his son who was working there. Well, that's great. And then he was leaving some other assets to his other kids, but at the end of the day, the business was where 90% of his net wealth was. And just because he was in the business, he didn't take care of the other kids, and they were all good, they were fine. But were they really? Were they really? Because guess what? They had kids, they had other lives, and they felt shortchanged. If he was to pass, they would be extremely shortchanged. And how do you do that? Well, one of the ways you can equalize that is with life insurance. So in that scenario, we recommended he bought a life insurance policy that would equal 1/3 of the business. He had 3 children, or actually 2/3 of the cost of the business, and that policy would benefit the other 2 children. So they would get cash, he would get the business. So that's how we would equalize everything out. But we communicated with the next generation and let them, and the parents brought the next generation in and said, how do we make this fair? It's better to resolve conflict and do proper planning with multi-generations before, rather than when you have to. When you're in a nursing home, you can't make these plans, or if you pass away, you can't determine that at the end of the day. Another thought I have, which is very interesting, and we've had a lot of trust in estate attorneys here, and we're going to have an attorney come in, and I read something on her bio that I felt was very interesting. She said setting up a trust makes everything private. Just having a will is public. Think about that for a second. Listen, we're going to be going break for a second. But if you don't have a trust set up and you just have a will and it has to go to a probate, that is a public event. Now, most of us want to be private about our finances and where things go. Setting up a trust does that. You're listening to the Main Street Code for Financial Success. I'm your host, Neil Himmelstein. I can be reached at 631-647-4694, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Main Street Code for Financial Success. I'm your host, Neil Himmelstein. I'm here every Friday at 3 o'clock. And if you miss an episode, you can catch me on Spotify or Apple, or go to my website, themainstreetcode.com, and see all the past episodes. Anyhow, prior to the break, we were talking about multi-generational planning. And earlier this week, I was working with an agent who called me, and he had a client, and two very successful people. They each have, he's 78 and she's 72. They're both retired. She has a teacher's pension coming in, which is great. They both have Social Security coming in. They got pretty good income coming in. You know, would they like more income? Yeah, probably. But they each have $1.5 million in retirement, in IRAs. And they are concerned because the advisor also happens to be an accountant, and he said to him, listen, you know, all this, if you guys pass, all this is going to be taxed to your kids, and they'll have to take it in 10 years. What is that going to do to their tax bracket? Or how's it going to affect their lives? And two of them were divorced, and one was married, and they have 3 grandchildren. They wanted to make sure the grandchildren were taken care of, and they need a plan, and, you know, they have assets. They also had like $400,000 in CDs or something. So they had some savings as well. So one of the things we teach people, now he's 78 and she's 72. And they like the market, they like the control, they like all that. And a lot of financial advisors, well, turn it into a Roth IRA and then down the road, everything will be tax-free. There's a problem with that, okay? The problem is when you convert any part of that IRA money you have into a Roth, it's taxable that year. Now, Roth IRA planning has to be done very specifically. I believe in it, but you have to be careful. Because if you convert anything to a Roth IRA, that year, whatever you convert becomes regular income, and you get taxed that year. So if you're on Social Security, your IRMA, which is your earnings, goes way up, and then Part B is Social Security. They're going to charge you a lot of money. So it's very important that you plan this out right, and there's not one solution. And I want to give you the solution I gave him, which he said, wow, this is perfect. This works out great. So what I suggested was they take $1 million out of the $1.5 million each. So we're going to take $2 million, and we're going to create an income stream for both of them, an immediate annuity. Now, there's all kinds of ways of structuring an immediate annuity. One of the ways I like to do it, you know, and I know other financial professionals in the field that do it in other ways, but one of the ways I like to recommend is called an installment refund annuity. What does that mean? Well, that means if it predeceases me, if I take out, let's say, $1 million and I buy an immediate annuity, normally if I do a life annuity, like a pension, most pensions, once you pass, the money is gone. But like Social Security, there's a survivor benefit, which is an annuity, by the way, and you could put a survivor benefit in it. But in this case, I want to put a benefit that if something happens to me, my $1 million isn't completely gone, even though I want to spend that $1 million because I want to get it out of my taxable estate and pass it on. I'll show you how we do that in a second. So if I create this income that I can't outlive, I put an installment refund so that if something happens before I take all my distributions, my heirs get the balance. So I'm not completely taking it away, although a lot of advisors will, and replace it with life insurance. And I'm going to show you how this all works. So in this case, I'm recommending they take $1 million out of the $1.5 million each. So that's a total of $2 million, $1 million each. And they annuitize it so that they have when you annuitize it, you spread out your taxes for yourself and you create income for yourself. So although all of it is taxable, the money's only taxable when you receive the money. So I'm going to have them make yearly payments from that $1 million to them for as long as they live. So I'm going to increase their income from that $2 million because of their age. The older you are, the higher the income is. It's very unique. The older you are, the more income you can get because it's considered a return of principal. So you get a return of principal plus an interest factor. So in their situation, they're going to end up with about $185,000 a year between the two of them forever, for as long as they live. Now it's skewed because he's 79, so I think most of that 185 goes towards his income, and the rest goes to her income. So my suggestion is we're going to take $1 million out of each of them and buy these immediate annuities and create $185,000 for as long as they live. Now, we're going to take $100,000 out of that 185. Why? That 185 is going to be taxable, but I'm only going to take 100 so you can pay taxes and still have some income left over, and buy, in their case, $3.5 million of survivorship life insurance. So we've taken a taxable asset of $2 million and we've created $3.5 million estate and federal income tax free. Now, the beauty about this life insurance is we set it up inside a life insurance trust. And inside that trust, it says who gets what. The trust is going to say, okay, the grandkids get this portion when they become 25 or 21, and they only get an income. The kids get the rest. My kid gets it, not his spouse, not anybody else. My children get this. Grandchildren get that. All that can be done inside a trust, inside the life insurance policy, which again, if it's owned by a trust, is a state and federal income tax free. Huge. I've taken taxable money and left it to my children and grandchildren, a state and federal tax free. That's big. If I leave it to them where it's taxable, not only is it estate taxable, it's income taxable. That $2 million is probably worth $1 million when it's all said and done. Now I'm leaving $3.5 million. Big difference. Now, I've left $500,000 each because they do like investing and everything else. And these are not pure numbers. They can do whatever they want. We can skew it any way you like. And with that, I want them to convert that to a Roth IRA. If they don't need the money right away, convert it to Roth. They don't have to do it all at once either. They can do it over 5 years. I don't want them to have too much income. Okay? Then, down the road, 5 years down the road, all that Roth IRA money that they've invested, they're going to have an extra bucket of money to take out tax-free forever. So we're creating income stream now, and then later we got another big income stream, but there'll be no taxes on that income stream. We've insulated their tax now. We've insulated the tax to their children, and we have a whole nother Roth IRA tax-free stream down the road. This is how we use annuities and life insurance all together to protect them. Now, they don't have long-term care insurance either. The 79-year-old, I can't get long-term care coverage for him today. Not in the state of New York. Don't have a plan for him in the state of New York. The spouse, we can. So we can get an individual policy for the younger spouse and protect for long-term care. And we could even, in some cases, if they're a little younger, under 75, get them both long-term care along with this, with those same dollars. So we're utilizing the dollars to take care of any unforeseen expenses. We're giving them tax-free income down the road. We're giving extra income now for whatever, and they haven't given up any assets. Wow! We're just like, this is just a home run in so many different ways. This is what we call multi-generational planning. We do this every day. We're not just thinking about the short term, doing this and doing that. You got to take care of all the families. You're listening to the Main Street Code for Financial Success. I'm so sorry we're running out of time today. I look forward to your questions and comments. Give me a call. Neil Himmelstein. Best way to reach me, 631-647-4694. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.